Tragic yet inspirational. I'm Joe Rentham with my review, Dark Side of the Ring, The Last of the Von Erichs. Really emotional stuff from Kevin Von Erich, and just the fact that he went through so goddamn much and he's still here. As he said, I used to have 5 brothers and now I'm not even a brother. And if that line doesn't hit you, I mean, and that's been said in other documentaries. Triumph and Tragedy of World Class Championship Wrestling from WWE. Heroes of World Class, which is an even better documentary. They're really great if you watch them, like kind of back to back. But both those documentaries just highlight all the stuff that happened with World Class Championship Wrestling. This focuses strictly on the Von Erichs as best as they can for 45 minutes. And you hear from various other personalities. And it really is nice to see that Kevin continued to live on despite the fact that, so much tragedy happened to his family, from his brothers to his father, and all the hardships of wrestling, that he is still here. He has his own kids who have their kids, and he's living in Hawaii having, a great life as he earned, with all the abuse to his body, like, physically, the emotional, trauma that he suffered. Can't imagine too many people would have survived that. So we have David Manning, who was a world-class championship wrestling referee and booker, and Jim Cornette talking about the dynasty of the Von Erichs in the 80s. And they were a huge dynasty. A couple quotes from Cornette here. The Von Erichs could have 2 legacies. They could have the legacy of being one of the biggest attractions in wrestling families in history, or they could have the legacy of a cautionary tale. And I would say among all the wrestling families, they were probably the one that suffered the most tragedy, especially in such a short time. Because the Von Erich, name rose up huge. They were huge in Texas, seen as God-fearing Texan boys, all-American boys. Outside the ring, though, they were human beings. Now, they've never, I think, meant anything bad by any of their actions, but, the business swallowed them up, and basically, a lot of other issues, drug issues, alcohol issues, personal issues, it can swallow people up whole, like, wrestling and just, the fame and everything. And it's amazing, quite frankly, that anybody survived that. It's amazing Kevin survived that. And there were some points where he even had to take breaks during the interviews. And you couldn't blame him. This is hard to revisit, even though you could tell he wanted to do it and he wanted to tell it to the Vice Squad, which kind of sounds a little bit wrong given the criminal charges with the family. But no, not him. I mean the Vice Squad, that worked on this show. And this was good. This was, really good stuff. Cornette says, I've loved the wrestling business all my life, but it's not that important, where, people died because of, like, the fame and everything, and it swallowed them whole. Kevin, in Hawaii, he basically just considering himself the richest man in the world. Some really good quotes here. Shares memories, pictures of the family. Talks Fritz being a Nazi and, being the most hated man in wrestling. David Manning talks about Fritz's career. The Claw, how the Claw, you can get really good at it. You can get scary good at it the more you perfect it. Meltzer talks about how Fritz wanted to get out of wrestling and start a company. Yeah, this is one of the few times where Meltzer, as far as historian being included, I understand. Now, his views on modern wrestling, I think, are a little bit, but it's his view, whatever. But as far as a historian, I have no problem him being included here, and he offered some good pieces, as good as Meltzer could offer. And the feedback from the fans was insane. The fans absolutely goddamn loved them. Kerry had the look. David was the best performer. Kevin was the athlete. Mike should have never been in the ring. Chris never should have been in the ring. That's pretty goddamn obvious. Von Erichs were huge all over. They were huge in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, in Israel. They were they had, tours in Israel where they, were basically rock stars because they were just seen as great goddamn talents. And 3 of them were. No disrespect to Mike as a person, no disrespect to Chris, but they shouldn't have been in the ring at all. The death of Jackie, that was the oldest brother. That was back when he was 6. He got electrocuted, that isn't drowned in the snow. And that tore up Fritz. Fritz basically wanted to be punished. What have I done to deserve this? And then they talk about the death of David Von Erich. He died in Japan. David Manning recalls that he found out he drove, he drove pretty far. I think it was over an hour, but I think he made it there in less time to talk to Fritz and basically tell him, because there were no cell phones back in 1984. And Fritz sees him, opens the door, and probably the most chilling thing. Which one? He knew. He knew it was one of them. And David had been sick. He had some intestinal thing. I forget the exact name of it. But basically his intestines ruptured and he died. bled out and everything, and it was really really bad. He couldn't he couldn't survive. Like in Kevin recalls how Bruiser Brody, who never really showed emotion. I mean, he showed rage, but never really showed sadness. He was just blubbering. He was just, he couldn't even form words. And Bruiser's trying to be strong, but he can't be strong. I mean, that's something right there, especially after just reviewing the Bruiser episode. And then David's death shocked Texas. Huge turnout at the service. I think there were a bunch of people outside of it. They said 4,000 to 5,000 people. They put a big screen and speakers out there so everybody could listen because nobody else could pack the goddamn church because they don't make churches that big in Texas. At least I don't think so. But Kevin was quoted saying, "Everyone's going to die, but we do our best until the day comes." And Kevin seems to have accepted the fact that yes, eventually he will die. We do all die. Everybody does die. And no, that's not the Lance Archer line. We are all human. But the one part that got me was, when they talked about the David Von Erich Memorial Show, the "Heaven Needs a Champion" song. I recall a line that a story that Michael Hayes told, very very briefly, because he was on that show. He was on Legends of Wrestling, and talking about how he was emotional and everything, and Kerry's just getting ready, and he's like, just saying, "That's your brother. Why aren't you upset?" But Kerry was about to win the championship from Ric Flair. 42,000 people in Texas Stadium. I mean, it was announced at like 50-something thousand, but I think it was like 42,000 paid, which, huge turnout. Unfortunately, that was the crescendo of the company. Kerry wins with a backslide, beats Ric Flair, only holds the championship for 20 days. Another Von Erich, it was the Lance Von Erich storyline, gets brought up a little bit later. We then see footage of Ross and Marshall, Kevin's sons, talking about wanting to follow in their father's footsteps. And they delve more into the Lance Von Erich storyline, which his name was Kevin Vaughn, I believe. What little bit I know about him, and he was a good athlete. And I mean, you take a look at footage of the guy looked like, he could have fit into the family if they weren't an actual family. Like if they were just a storyline family, not an actual family, it might have worked, but it didn't work. And the fans were upset because Von Erichs lied. You can have the tragedies, you can have all that stuff, but especially when it comes to Texas, especially when it comes to fans there, you lie, that's it. You lie about something like that, that's fucking it. You can have your performance, you can have your storylines, you can have your pomp and circumstance. No, not the Randy Savage theme song. Not that. You can have all the flash and all the pizzazz and everything, and the goofy characters, Kamala, Kabuki, Missing Link, all that, Playboy Gary Hart, various other people. Gino Hernandez not really playing a character. That's basically who Gino was. You can have all that. You lie, that is it. Mike wasn't cut out to be a wrestler. He had shoulder surgery, got toxic shock syndrome. It fried his brain. He had brain damage. Kevin was quoted as saying, he looked really gaunt and hollow. He attacked a stoplight, a parked car, because he had rage fits. Because his brain was fried. It didn't know what it was doing. It couldn't heal itself fast enough. He wanted to get back in the ring. He never should have gotten back in the ring. He was at a Cotton Bowl show, the comeback show. I don't know if he wrestled on that show. I had to look at the lineup there. But he did come back, shortly after his surgery, or sometime after his surgery. Kevin needed a break at one point. He says, "Hey, can we, take a break?" Because he had just finished talking about Mike O'Dean in the woods, and they didn't find him for a few days. Chris wanted to wrestle, but his body couldn't handle it. The Von Erichs were seen all over the world for good and bad. All the tragedies, all the criminal acts that they did. Criminal charges, that kind of stuff, drunk driving, drug possession. The company fell off quick. By 88, 89, he was going to be the USWA. I think it was by 89 it became the USWA, if I recall correctly. Jerry Jarrett took it over. Chris could not keep up with the Von Erichs. He had like an asthma medication to make his bones brittle because of like something in there, prednisone or something like that. And he eventually shot himself because he broke his arm. He couldn't train. And that was it. That was really bad. And, the whole thing, did you read my note? Chris wasn't going to kill himself, and then he did. Kevin found him. Kerry goes to WWE. It doesn't really work. He did win the Intercontinental Championship, but he wasn't the performer he was. They briefly bring up the fact he was wrestling with a prosthetic foot. Changes his gimmick. It led to his death. He had drug possession charges he was going to go to jail for. He shot himself in February of 1993, very soon after or just before Dino Bravo. It was around that time. I forget the exact date, but they both died in February of 1993. You can check out my reviews of the second season if you'd like. And he said to Carrie, or Kevin said to Carrie, basically, you can't do that to me. Like, we're gonna figure something out, but we can't die. And Carrie had shot himself, and Fritz had found him and said, "Never seen such a peaceful look on Carrie's face. Must have hit him just right. You used to have 5 brothers, and now I'm not even a brother." Fritz and Doris, the mother, they pass away. Doris eventually does pass away. Fritz passes away due to cancer, brain cancer. He even points a gun at Kevin, and Kevin's all scared, runs out of the house. I'm not gonna let cancer decide if I live or die. He tries to steal a gun to go to jail. Gun owner says to him, "Love you, Kev." Kevin needed to hear that. Then he found the inspiration to continue. Lived in Texas for a while, then started raising his family in Hawaii. I have never been so happy and peaceful. His last match was in, I believe, July in 2017, Israel, with his sons, and that was a great thing. It was a great way to wrap it up. Really goddamn sad. If you don't get emotional during this, I really don't know what to tell you. Anyway, agree, disagree, what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.